General James Jim Thompson stood before the grand table in the Pentagon's war room, the dimly lit space thick with the weight of decisions made in the shadows of history. Around him, the military elite of the United States, Army, Navy, and Air Force, filled the room with a murmur of tense voices. The world had changed in the span of hours. The Zoker, an alien species known for its brutal conquests, had arrived in human space, and their General Karvok had made one thing clear. Humanity was weak, a mere blip in the galaxy. Their ultimatum was simple: surrender or face annihilation. Thompson, long past his prime, leaned on his cane, his once strong frame now bearing the wear of too many years in battles. A veteran of the Gulf Wars, Iraq, and the countless skirmishes in the global theater, he had seen his share of enemies. But this was different. A galactic power, led by a general who openly mocked human strength, declared them cowards. The audacity struck at his core, but it was his military instincts that sharpened in the face of it. Across from him, the Secretary of Defense, Mason Sinclair, was speaking in hushed tones with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They debated strategy, calling up holographic maps and data projections, all of which painted a grim picture. But Sinclair's eyes, heavy with the burden of the decision, turned back to Thompson, as if seeking a glimmer of hope. It wasn't there. "General Thompson," Sinclair's voice cut through the room. "We need your opinion. What would you recommend?" Thompson's jaw tightened. The choice before them was monumental. The Zoker demanded humanity's immediate submission, a decision that would relegate Earth to the status of a vassal planet in an interstellar empire. Resistance was expected to be futile. Yet, as he surveyed the faces of the men and women around the table, he knew what was being asked of him. They didn't need his opinion. They needed him to lead. The room fell silent. Thompson's gaze swept across the faces of the men who had fought beside him in decades past, their eyes reflecting a mix of doubt and desperation. They looked to him as if he were their last hope. The truth gnawed at him. The human race had never faced a threat like this. Sinclair's next words hit like a hammer. "General, I need you to understand. This is not a negotiation. Karvok's ultimatum is final. They've given us one choice. Accept it or prepare to face extinction. We need a response now." Thompson inhaled deeply. His military mind raced through options, but each one led to a dead end. The Zoker were far superior technologically. Their ships could destroy entire fleets in minutes. Their weapons could rend mountains. This wasn't just another war. It was the endgame. Humanity could not win this fight, not through conventional means. The Zoker were too strong, too efficient. They would crush them. A low murmur of voices filled the room again, but Thompson's mind narrowed. A face from his past flashed before him. The face of his late son, a soldier who had died in a conflict far less significant, yet the loss had shattered him in ways no one could understand. He wasn't about to let humanity fall in the same way. "General, what's the decision?" Sinclair's voice cracked through his thoughts. Thompson's grip tightened on his cane. "I'll go." The words struck the room like thunder. The murmurs ceased, all eyes now on him. "You'll what?" Sinclair asked, his disbelief evident. "I'll go," Thompson repeated, his voice calm but resolute. "I'll face Karvok." The silence in the room stretched to an uncomfortable length. The Joint Chiefs exchanged glances, eyebrows raised in disbelief. "With all due respect, General," one of them spoke up, his voice edged with skepticism, "you're well past your prime. The Zoker's general isn't some field commander you can outmaneuver. You'll need more than a reputation to win this fight." Thompson turned his steely gaze to the officer. "You think I don't know that? I've seen wars come and go, but I'm not going to send thousands of men to die. Not if there's a chance, however slim, that we can do something about it." Sinclair stood motionless, his hands pressed against the cool surface of the table. He stared at Thompson, his mind clearly calculating. Then, with a sigh, he gave a reluctant nod. "Fine, you'll go, but you won't be alone. We'll assign a team to you." Thompson shook his head. "No, just me." A few officers shifted in their seats, exchanging whispers. "General, this is a suicide mission. You can't be serious. one of them said. Thompson looked at them all, his expression unwavering. If I die fighting, but I'm not going to let humanity fall without giving it a shot. I won't have their blood on my hands because we thought the odds were too great. No, I'll go alone. It's my fight to lose. The room fell silent once more. He could see the hesitation in their eyes, the doubt, but there was something else there too, respect. Thompson had lived a life few could understand. He had sacrificed more than anyone here could imagine. And if anyone could make a stand against the Zoker, it was him. After a long pause, Sinclair spoke again, his voice somber. I can't order you to go, but I won't stop you. We'll give you everything you need. Ships, resources, and anything else you require. Thompson nodded, his mind already working through the details of the mission. He would need to gather his team, the best of the best, men who understood the harsh realities of war. But even as he accepted the mission, something inside him felt the weight of what was about to unfold. This wasn't just about saving humanity. It was about proving to the Zoker that there was something they couldn't crush, the human spirit. As the meeting adjourned, Thompson turned to leave. His back was straight, his steps measured, despite the weariness of age. He had never been one to back down from a fight. And this fight, this one, would be his legacy. If humanity was to survive, it would do so on the back of one old soldier's resolve. As he exited the room, the door closing behind him with a quiet finality, Thompson whispered to himself, "Let's show them who the real cowards are." General Thompson's ship, the Vanguard, cut through the void of space like a bullet aimed at the heart of an implacable enemy. The Zoker's stronghold loomed ahead, an alien fortress of steel and fire, perched on a barren planet far from any human settlement. The message had been received. An impossible ultimatum delivered by the Zoker general, Karvok, who had promised the swift annihilation of humanity if they dared to resist. Yet here Thompson was, with a crew of the most experienced soldiers humanity could muster, preparing to face an enemy unlike any they had ever known. He sat in the cockpit, hands resting on the controls. His sharp eyes scanned the vast emptiness ahead, but his mind was elsewhere, back at the Pentagon, in the war room. The faces of the men and women who had stood before him, skeptical and fearful, flashed through his mind. It hadn't been easy convincing them. One man alone, going to face the most advanced military force humanity had ever encountered. The logic was overwhelming. What could one man do? But Thompson was no stranger to impossible odds. He'd seen them all before, the impossible battles, the campaigns that no one thought could succeed. In the end, it was always the human spirit that triumphed. Or so he told himself. The truth was, as much as he believed in humanity, even he couldn't see a clear path to victory here. His second-in-command, Sergeant Major Frank Malone, approached from behind, his boots echoing on the ship's steel floor. "Sir," Malone said, his voice steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. "We're almost in range." "Good," Thompson muttered, not looking up. "Prepare the team." Malone paused, studying Thompson's back. "You're really going through with this, aren't you?" Thompson finally met Malone's gaze. The man was older than he looked, having fought in more wars than he could count. But even he had his doubts. Thompson saw it in his eyes, and he understood. Hell, he had his own doubts. "I am," Thompson said simply. "We don't have a choice." Malone nodded. "Understood, sir. We're with you." There was no further conversation. As the Vanguard breached the atmosphere of the Zoker stronghold, the rest of the crew moved into position. The tension in the air was palpable. These were seasoned soldiers, but the unknown was always unnerving. Thompson could feel it in his bones, too, the gnawing fear that no amount of preparation could quell. He had led men into countless engagements, but this was different. It wasn't just a fight for a country or a continent. This was humanity's survival. The ship landed with a soft thud on the cracked, barren surface. The sound was so small in comparison to the weight of the moment. Thompson opened the hatch, stepping onto the alien soil. His boots sank slightly into the dust, and the desolate landscape stretched out before him. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a tomb waiting to be filled. Malone and the rest of the team, 4 men, each experts in their respective fields, followed him out, their movements synchronized as if by instinct. Each of them wore the same expression, steely resolve tempered by the knowledge of the odds. They had been through hell and back, but this was the first time they had seen a challenge this monumental. "We're not here for a fight," Thompson said, his voice calm but firm. "We're here to win." The men nodded, understanding the weight of their orders. Thompson had made it clear this wasn't about standing toe-to-toe with the Zoker. That would be suicide. No, they would infiltrate the fortress, sabotage their infrastructure, and if necessary, bring down Karvok himself. But that was a last resort. The Zoker didn't understand subtlety or human cunning. It would be their advantage. As they moved toward the fortress, the scale of the structure became clear. Towers that scraped the skies above, adorned with strange alien symbols that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The whole fortress was a monument to the Zoker's hubris, their belief that their technology and sheer force could make them untouchable. Inside, they were met with a pristine, almost clinical atmosphere. The Zoker had taken great care in maintaining their fortress, a place that seemed almost too clean, too orderly for a race so brutal. The walls gleamed with alien materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was a fortress in every sense. Invulnerable, impervious to attack. Except that was exactly the point. The Zoker had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated humanity. They thought themselves invincible because they had never encountered an enemy like the one they were about to face. Karvok's arrogance would be their undoing. "Team," Thompson said, breaking the silence. "We've trained for this. We stick to the plan. If we do this right, we won't need to fight at all." They moved in shadows, their footsteps light, their senses heightened. The first objective was simple: reach the main control room and disable the fortress's power grid. It would be the key to ensuring the Zoker's technological superiority meant nothing. They had no idea how long they could keep the power down, but they knew one thing. As long as they could cause chaos, disrupt their systems, they would have a chance. The first barrier they encountered was a massive wall of Zoker soldiers, armored and equipped with weapons that crackled with energy. The soldiers moved in tight formation, scanning the area with terrifying precision. Thompson signaled for his team to hold. They knew the Zoker's tactics well. Their strength was their coordination, their technology. But that was where humanity could win. They would not fight them head-on. They would make the Zoker fight on their terms. Malone gestured to the others. They spread out, using the environment to their advantage. Thompson's mind worked quickly, calculating angles, weaknesses. The Zoker soldiers had never seen anything like this. No one had. The first explosion rang out, an EMP device strategically placed. The Zoker soldiers' weapons sputtered and died. Their communications went silent. "What the hell?" a Zoker voice hissed through the darkness. A moment of chaos. Then the humans moved. Thompson's team descended like ghosts, moving quickly through the disoriented enemy lines. They didn't kill yet. They didn't need to. They just needed to disrupt. And it worked. The Zoker were scrambling, confused by the sudden lack of control. But Thompson knew the real test was still to come. Karvok would not take kindly to being mocked. And that, Thompson thought, is where humanity would prove its worth. The flickering hologram of the Zoker fortress grew larger on the main display, a dark monolith against the barren horizon. General Thompson stood at the front of the small, makeshift command center, his eyes narrowing as he studied the layout. He could almost feel the weight of the alien technology pressing in on them, its vast labyrinthine structure designed to trap, to overpower. But Thompson had learned long ago to read between the lines of an enemy's strength. He saw the weakness where others might only see might. His team, crouched at scattered positions in the dim light of the command center, was waiting for his orders. Malone, the ever-reliable sergeant major, stood by the weapons console, his face tight with concentration. The rest of the squad was already prepped for the next phase. They had successfully disabled the first wave of Zoker defenses, but this was the real test. The Zoker Central Command still hummed with the oppressive power of their technology, and Karvok's eyes would be on them, watching for any slip, any mistake. "Thompson," Malone's voice cut through the silence, his tone sharp. "We've got 3 incoming patrols. We'll be outnumbered and outgunned. You still sure we don't need backup? Thompson's gaze never wavered from the fortress's layout. His mind was racing, calculating. No backup. This has to be us. No one else can get close enough without triggering alarms. It's our fight. Malone hesitated, then nodded grimly. Thompson didn't need to see the worry in his friend's face to know it was there. The old veteran had seen too many good men die in too many pointless wars. But this wasn't about fighting for territory or glory. This was about survival. For humanity. The first patrol appeared on the sensors. Alien foot soldiers, their armor glinting with an otherworldly sheen, weapons raised, scanning for intruders. Thompson's team melted into the shadows, blending seamlessly with the environment. They moved with a practiced, quiet precision, evading detection in the sterile, vast corridors of the Zoker fortress. Thompson's breath came steady, but beneath the calm, his heart raced. This wasn't just a mission. This wasn't just another assignment. This was the moment. The one that would define whether humanity could face its greatest fear and rise above it. The first contact came like a ripple in the dark. One of the soldiers triggered a proximity alarm. A low hum buzzed through the walls, signaling the breach. Thompson's mind snapped into action. He grabbed Malone by the shoulder, and with a single sharp motion, they split off from the others, moving in opposite directions. The sound of footsteps grew louder as the Zoker patrol rounded the corner. Thompson reached into his pack, retrieving a small device. With a subtle motion, he triggered an EMP burst that sent a shockwave of energy through the surrounding systems. The patrol staggered as their weapons and communication systems flickered out, giving the humans a precious few seconds of advantage. "Move!" Thompson barked, and his team sprang into action. It wasn't a fight. It was a controlled chaos, precision strikes, calculated distractions, and quick, efficient takedowns. Thompson had never needed to explain the strategy. His team knew their roles instinctively, each man executing his part flawlessly. They were ghosts, unseen and unheard, dismantling the Zoker's fortress from the inside. Minutes later, the last of the patrol was neutralized, their weapons rendered useless, their bodies left unscathed. The real battle, however, was only beginning. The team moved quickly toward their next objective, the power core of the fortress. It was the heart of everything, and Thompson knew that if they couldn't shut it down, nothing they did would matter. "We've got 2 more patrols up ahead," Malone said, his voice low. "We'll need to split up again." Thompson nodded. "We stick to the plan. We move fast. We move quiet. And we don't get caught." The team split again, moving silently through the darkened corridors, the tension mounting with each step. Thompson's thoughts lingered on the final objective. Karvok. He had been the one to challenge humanity, the one who had dared to call them cowards. This wasn't just about disabling the fortress. This was about proving him wrong. As they reached the core chamber, the door slid open with an eerie hum. Inside, the power core pulsed with an unnatural, almost hypnotic light. Thompson took a moment to study it, his mind calculating the next move. He couldn't afford a mistake here. They had no time to waste. "We're going to overload the system," he said, turning to the team. "Get the explosives set up. We don't leave until it's done." The men moved with practiced efficiency, placing charges around the core. It would take just a few moments, but in that time, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The Zoker had eyes everywhere, and Karvok was no fool. He would know they were coming. Before he could voice his concerns, the door at the far end of the chamber slid open with a hiss, and a figure stepped into the room. The Zoker soldier was tall, its skin a strange shade of silver, its eyes glowing with a cold, calculating intelligence. It wasn't a guard. It wasn't even an elite soldier. It was something more. Thompson's heart skipped a beat. The being before him was no ordinary soldier. It was a scout in an advanced unit, one that had been sent to stop them. The room froze for a heartbeat, both sides staring one another down. The Zoker's voice, when it came, was cold and guttural. "You think you could defeat Karvok? You are nothing. Your species is weak, your efforts futile." Thompson's jaw clenched. "I think you'll find humans don't give up that easily." Before the Zoker could react, Thompson's team sprang into action. taking down the scout in a flurry of motion. They didn't need to kill him. They needed to send a message. The explosion charge was set. The core would be destabilized, and the Zoker's perfect fortress would be crippled. The scout's body was left behind, an empty shell, but his words lingered in Thompson's mind. Your species is weak. The power core hummed once more, a deadly reminder of what awaited them if they failed. With one last look, Thompson nodded to his team. They'd disrupted the Zoker's fortress. They'd struck back against the impossible. But the battle was far from over. As the countdown began, Thompson felt the weight of their next move pressing in on him. Karvok was waiting. And this time, it would be personal. The explosion rocked the Zoker fortress, sending a shockwave that reverberated through the walls. The hum of the power core, once steady and unyielding, faltered and sputtered. Thompson barely flinched at the blast. He had expected it, calculated it, planned for it. But as the dust and debris settled, the reality of what lay ahead came crashing down. "Move!" Thompson shouted, his voice hoarse with the urgency of the moment. The team surged forward, following him through the crumbling passageways, racing against the clock. The fortress was beginning to collapse, its once imposing structure now turning on itself as the disruption spread like wildfire through its circuits. Malone's voice crackled through the comms. The Zoker are scrambling. They're sending reinforcements. Thompson didn't need to hear it. He could already sense the impending assault, the rising tension, the deafening silence that followed the chaos. The Zoker were relentless, and now that their technological superiority had been compromised, they would come at them with everything they had. They'd learned the cost of underestimating humanity. Now it was time for them to learn the cost of arrogance. They reached the central chamber, the heart of the fortress, where Karvok, the Zoker general, awaited them. The air seemed to vibrate with the force of his presence. His massive form, clad in intricate alien armor, stood tall and imposing at the far end of the room, surrounded by a legion of his elite guard. The moment Thompson stepped into the room, Karvok's cold, calculating gaze locked onto him. "So, it is you." Karvok's voice rumbled, deep and resonant, like the sound of distant thunder. "The pathetic humans. You dare challenge the Zoker Empire." Thompson's grip on his rifle tightened. The odds were still impossible, but he had never been one to back down. Not in war, not in life. "We don't back down," Thompson replied, his voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline flooding his system. "You were wrong about us. You called us cowards, but we've always fought for survival. And we always will." Karvok's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Survival? Your species is insignificant in the grand design. You are ants beneath the boot of the galaxy." Thompson's eyes flicked to Malone, who was already positioning the team for a strategic strike. They had no illusions about defeating Karvok in direct combat. It wasn't just his strength. They had already seen that the Zoker general was a master tactician, an intellect to match his physical might. But they still had one weapon left: humanity's ability to adapt, to innovate under pressure. The Zoker underestimated that at their peril. "We'll see who's insignificant," Thompson said, a grim resolve hardening in his chest. The room was an arena, the perfect battleground for Karvok's ego. But Thompson knew better. This wasn't about showing strength, it was about survival. The explosion had created a temporary disruption, throwing off the Zoker's coordination. If they could just hold out long enough, if they could push Karvok into making a mistake, they might just have a chance. "Open fire!" Thompson barked. The sound of gunfire filled the air, sharp and brutal. The team moved with practiced efficiency, their shots precise, targeting the weaker points in the Zoker defenses. But Karvok was no ordinary enemy. His guards moved like shadows, their weapons lethal, their coordination flawless. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but they fought with the ferocity of a species that had nothing left to lose. Karvok bellowed in rage, his massive frame charging forward. He was a blur of motion, his weapon crackling with energy. Thompson's heart pounded in his chest as he dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding a blast that could have torn him apart. The air hummed with the intensity of the battle, every second feeling like an eternity. For all his size and power, Karvok was human in one respect. He had underestimated his enemy. He believed that the humans were a broken species, unable to fight back, incapable of standing against the might of the Zoker. But Thompson and his team had shown him the truth. They were not weak. They were not cowards. They were survivors. Thompson's eyes locked on a Karvok's, and for a brief moment, time seemed to slow. The general's arrogance was palpable, his confidence blinding. He believed the humans had no hope. But Thompson's years of combat experience had taught him one undeniable truth. It was never the first strike that mattered. It was the second. He gave Malone a single nod. It was all the signal the sergeant major needed. Now! Malone yelled. With a sharp motion, Malone activated the secondary charges. Small, compact devices placed throughout the room that had been carefully hidden among the chaos of the battle. The Zoker guards, distracted by the firefight, never saw them coming. The explosions were timed to perfection, sending shockwaves through the chamber and knocking the elite soldiers off their feet. In that split second of confusion, Thompson lunged forward, his weapon raised. Karvok was momentarily distracted by the blast, his focus diverted. It was all Thompson needed. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, his combat instincts taking over. The two collided with the force of 1,000 storms. Karvok's immense strength pushing Thompson back, but the general's arrogance was his undoing. He left an opening, just a brief moment where Thompson saw his chance. Thompson's rifle discharged, hitting Karvok square in the chest. The impact wasn't enough to take him down, but it caused enough damage to slow the Zoker leader, forcing him to stumble back. Is this your best? Karvok sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Thompson took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of his remaining strength. He had no illusions about the fight. He wasn't going to defeat Karvok in direct combat. But humanity didn't need to win every battle. It only needed to outlast the enemy long enough to turn the tide. With a savage cry, Thompson launched himself forward again, this time relying not on brute strength, but on speed, precision, and the will to survive. The final confrontation was not about defeating Karvok physically. It was about proving that humanity could adapt, could innovate, and could fight when it mattered most. And for Thompson, that was enough.